Well, hello everyone. Hey, welcome back. It's another tremendous terrific Tuesday here at the Veteran Link YouTube channel, where we're going to talk more VA disability as we try to smooth out this process between veterans and VA alike. Now, what I have here today for you is a really good topic, I feel, and it's going to dive deeper into ultimately the rating scheduler, as we call it. So before I move on, for those who aren't familiar, I am your friendly VA accredited attorney, Matthew Lang. Years of experience in the VA, veteran myself, and all that other good stuff that isn't the time to go into. So what I'm going to do today is switch my screen over so you can follow along with me as I go through the ecfr, or the Code of Federal Regulations. So I say ecfr because this is the public website for everybody, ecfr.gov, where you can find all the Code of Federal Regulations. Now we're going to focus in on Title 38, and then we're going to dig down into Part 4, and we're going to talk about that rating scheduler a little bit. Kind of give you a familiarity of where it's at, kind of how it's laid out, the way it reads a bit. I won't be able to give you all the detail in the world on it, just because I try to keep these videos short, but it's definitely something we can always revisit, just like any other topic down the road and in the future here, where we can give more information. But let's get an understanding of this site, what it looks like, how to navigate it just a little bit, so that, hey, VA, when your systems are down, you know how to navigate through this and double check things, or even when they're not, you know where this is outside of your VA systems. You can access it just from the public internet. Veterans, this is also a good tool for you because, again, it's public and it allows you to see what the rules are and what the criteria is for many conditions. Now, one thing we do have to keep in mind, though, is this rating scheduler inside of 38 C.F.R. Part 4 does not list every diagnosable condition. So keep in mind, it is a sense of a guide in that way, as VA will have to find the best, well, code, as I'll explain it, to use when the diagnosis is not listed. So let's get down to it. Let's peruse that CFR and learn a little bit more. Okay, everybody, here on my screen is the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, again, this is through the ecfr.gov website, and as you can see, we have all the titles underneath the CFR as we scroll slowly through it. Now, I'm going to speed it up a little bit just so we can get down to Title 38, where we ultimately live in the VA world. If you click on the Title 38 there, it's going to take you into the different chapters it has. Now, understand Title 38 covers more than just VA disability. So you're going to see some other options there, including Armed Forces Retirement Home, for example. But when you're navigating to the rating scheduler, in our case, you can go to Chapter 1 here, which is the Department of Veterans Affairs. From there, you're going to see all these different parts break out. Now, to get to the rating scheduler, we want to get to Part 4, which is our schedule of rating disabilities, as you see. So after we click in there, you're going to get still a few more sections. Now, I understand it's a lot of clicking to get through, but we'll do it one more time after I do this, just to get you familiar with how to get in there. So here we have a subpart A and a subpart B. When we want the actual rating scheduler itself, we're going to come down to the subpart B. And as you see, when you drop that down, it's going to start showing you the different body systems. Now, the musculoskeletal system is on top here, and you'll see a bunch of other, well, sections that fall within here. But how do we get to the actual criteria itself for the rating scheduler? Well, if you look towards the bottom, you're going to find the schedule of ratings for musculoskeletal system and the schedule of ratings for muscle injuries. So the musculoskeletal system actually covers bones and muscle. So you got two different schedulers there, the one for the actual skeletal piece and the one for the actual muscle piece there. So let's go ahead and minimize that down for a second, just so you can kind of see how this is working from the top here. We have organs of special sense. Again, we've got a few additional provisions that may apply to various situations and to this rating scheduler and for the VA to think about. But if you see right in the bottom of that list, you got the schedule of ratings for eyes. So if you catch on to the trend right away here, you'll see most of the time the scheduler is actually at the bottom of each body section. Unless you have something like musculoskeletal, where you have one's not quite the bottom and the other one's on the bottom. Well, if we minimize that one too, we can keep coming down. Impairment of auditory acuity. Again, just a few extra little pieces for consideration here. And then we have the actual schedule for ratings for that section here at the bottom of that list. We can keep doing this with infectious diseases. I'm speaking too fast. And you can see that's on the bottom as well. Respiratory system, not as many provisions here. Only one provision in this one, but we get the rating schedule for respiratory right on the bottom. Cardiovascular, same thing. Digestive system, same thing. So I hope you're taking a point here. We can do this with all of them. You're going to find the actual scheduler for each body system located on the bottom of that list. Now let's go back to that musculoskeletal system here. We're going to open this up. We're not going to get into all the detail with the other provisions in here and how they apply for this video. We're definitely going to do that over time and probably have touched on a lot of this briefly already. But let's go down to the musculoskeletal system, the 4.71a. If you click on that there, you'll find that you open up this schedule of ratings for the musculoskeletal section. Now, each section, as you see, as we open each one, will start with a 4-digit number. Well, as you see here, we start with 5,000. Well, the 5,000 line starts our musculoskeletal system here. It's going to give you your diagnosis, and it's going to give you the criteria for each evaluation, as you see the evaluation off to the right here from the criteria. Now, one thing I'm going to point out to VA is what we can't forget, and veterans, you should catch on to this too, but there may be notes like this condition here that go along with that rating scheduler piece, and these are very crucial in most cases. And I point this out, VA, because I see a lot of times in practice that you'll miss the notes, and the notes may get missed, one, because of lack of familiarity, perhaps, with the C.F.R., and this is me talking from experience, or the idea that you rely too much on an evaluation builder and it's not programmed correctly to catch the note. So keep in mind, there are some additional notes in here that could affect how those criteria are used for each one of these conditions. Now, if we scroll down, you're going to see 5001. So we're going in order, and we get our condition there, and we get the criteria there, 5002, so forth, right? You're going to see this all the way down. Now, one thing I'm going to do is scroll back to the top here because I want you to see something else. Now, these are just acute, subacute, or chronic diseases. So this is just a list of diseases. A popular one that we do run into is the 5003, which is our degenerative arthritis. But there's different criteria in here that will ultimately lead us to different codes to use in many cases. Now, as we keep going down through this, and we get through our diseases, one thing that you're going to really catch on to in the musculoskeletal section is the way it's designed and the way it's set up. Now we're going to start talking about these prosthetic implants and resurfacing. So a bunch of notes already at the beginning there. Things that we need to take in consideration when it comes to each one of these conditions that are listed in these codes down here. But ultimately, we're in our shoulder replacement here or elbow replacement. As you can see, the codes now jump to a 5051. So we changed the area that we're in a bit, but we're identifying that that change occurred. We're no longer in those diseases listed at the beginning. Now, we can keep going through this. You're going to find your wrist, your hip, your knee, and so forth. And I'm going to scroll a little fast through this because I hope you go back when you have time and look at these too and see these criteria and how they line up. But as you see, we still end up with the criteria. We still end up with the rating. Now here you have major and minor noted, and you're going to see that in a lot of joints. So usually when we come to something like, let me scroll back up, the shoulder here, or even the hip has it, and the wrist, you may see where if you're dominant on one side, veteran, so for example, if you're right-handed, your major wrist is going to be your right wrist, and your minor one is going to be your left. And that's just how the law breaks out, because you are ultimately losing more of your functionality based upon the fact that you've lost your right wrist, which is your major wrist, because that's what the one you use majority of the time to write with, to pick things up with, to help you grasp things, drive, whatever it may be. All right, so with that in mind, we keep scrolling through, and we're going to start getting to a series of different things in here. Again, we start moving through a series of tables and all kinds of other potential things to consider, like SMC codes, just various here. So this one might get a little bit messy at the beginning here. We get underneath amputations here at this point, but we're in the upper extremities. Now, I can keep scrolling through this whole thing for you and continue probably boring you with this, but I want you to get the idea that as you see, as we scroll, the numbers slightly change. We still stay within the 5,000 range because we're in the musculoskeletal. But once we hit now the amputations, we're in the 5,100 range. And we start talking about 5,120 and 5,122 and 5,123 and so forth. And then we move from, sorry, as I scroll back up again, but as you see, it talks about the upper extremity. Now we're in the fingers. And one thing that you'll probably notice, and for the most part, for the musculoskeletal side, is as you scroll through this, it's going to lead you down a certain joints until there's nothing left of that extremity there, and then it's going to jump back and lead you back down a different location. So now we're in the, more of the fingers here on the amputations, and we're working our way down. I'd like to really get out of the amputations here. You'll actually see also diagrams in here that'll help you understand where the metacarpals are, the different phalanges, and then you've got other diagrams in here that'll actually start talking about range of motion and show you what that looks like too. So if you're ever curious to see how flexion is determined or extension is determined or abduction, you'll actually find a lot of that in here in these different diagrams as well. Now we haven't made it down that far at this point to see all that, but as you see now, once we get through that, we're going to go for the shoulder and the arm. And we're going to work our way down now from the shoulder and the arm. And as you see, again, we've got that major and we got that minor, and we start now with 5,200 here, 5,201, 5,202. So we move in the shoulder. Now, as you see, we go from the shoulder to the elbow and forearm. So just picture that. You went from your shoulder, and as you go down one arm, you're down the elbow, you're down the forearm. So the code is working in a direction. It's working down the arm at this point because it decided to start there. And as it continues down, you'll eventually see, and I apologize for scrolling too fast, you'll see the wrist. And you're going to see eventually that's going to end, and before you know it, we're going to end up in areas of like the back and the legs, the knees, the hips, and all that good stuff. And you're going to see it do a lot of the same here because now we're on the fingers here. So as we run out here, and again, I apologize for the quick scroll, but I do hope you go back again and look at this on your own because there's just so much information in here and so much criteria to look at. What we find now, we come back to the spine. Why? Because we went down the shoulder, we went to the elbow, the forearm, to the wrist, to the fingers, and after the fingers, well, we're in dead space, right? So now we're going to restart back towards the top, and we're going to start in the spine. Well, here you're going to find sometimes in these criteria, you're going to find these generalized formulas. So in this case, the spine is actually covering the neck, the mid-back, the lower back, just for more layman terms. And here you're going to see it called the cervical and the thoracical lumbar spine. So the mid and the lower back, as you note here, is put together inside the C.F.R. But this is your criteria here. Again, your criteria, your ratings for each criteria as long as they're met. And then you can keep going down. Again, you're going to see notes. A lot of times, again, these notes, as I pointed out before, and I'm going to keep pointing out, are very important when it comes to the actual usage of these criteria. You may find sometimes these notes will give a higher criteria than what you see up above. Sometimes it'll tell you to go to another diagnostic code if certain situations occur. So very important pieces to look at. But here, all these conditions are going to be lumped together. See how we're still in the 52 area. Then we start moving to the 30s and the 40s. So there's a reason to all the numbers that are there as it all lines up. Now we can keep doing this with this section. I can keep making you dizzy as I scroll through, and I don't want to do that. I think you got the idea with this section here. It's going to work the same, really, in a lot of other sections. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click back into that subpart B area so we can come back to our list of body systems. So let's take a peek at maybe the respiratory system, since it still happens to be open on my screen. Well, 4.97 is our respiratory. As I mentioned, you come to the bottom of that listing there and you see the schedule ratings. Now, VA, I want to highlight on this one, don't disregard 4.96. It's a very important section, but veterans also don't disregard that. Go ahead and look at that and read that. It's going to read a little legalese, so it might be a little confusing, but it does have an important provision in there when it comes to actually assigning evaluations. And it's going to really talk about the idea of what diagnostic codes can be evaluated separately and which ones have to be combined as one code. So veterans, you may see that on your decisions where you may see two different respiratory conditions put together as one with one evaluation. Well, that's because likely this provision is preventing that separation. Now, I point it to VA as well because sometimes I see these conditions get pushed together when they're actually allowed to be separated underneath this provision. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and get into a peek at the respiratory system. So as we look at the respiratory system, you're going to find a very similar setup, if not the same, as the musculoskeletal. But now here, our codes start with 65. So we know we're in the respiratory system. We knew we were in the musculoskeletal system when we were in the 5000s, in the 5200s, and so forth. Here, we now know we're in the respiratory section when we're in the 6500s. Now, it really does the same thing here. We have diagnoses, we have our evaluations next to it. We may get a series of diagnoses put together. So like in this case, sinusitis can affect different sections. So depends on where that's at, if it's the frontal, if it's the maxillary. The idea is that the code or the rating is likely going to be about the same. So they're bunched together here, and you get a general formula for that. Kind of like you did the spine there. Generalized formula, here's the criteria, here's the evaluation again. Now this one actually has a 0% on the bottom of it. I don't recall if some of those musculoskeletal ones did because I forgot to pay attention and note it, and I'm pretty sure they do. But the idea here is veterans, one thing when you're looking at this, you got to understand this has a 0 here, but maybe this one down here does not. It goes down to 10. There's another provision in the law that will come into play that even if you have the condition but you don't meet the criteria for this lower level here, it is possible for you to still receive a 0 even though the 0 is not listed here. So keep that in mind. That doesn't mean that the only thing you can get is a 10 or above in this case, or a 0 and above in this one. You'll also see things in the code where when you come to an evaluation, especially a 100% evaluation, you're going to see these little numbers up here. What we're going to find if we really went through the whole regulation, and towards the bottom here, is it's going to identify that we need to consider SMC in this situation. Does SMC apply? Should it be paid out for this condition at whatever level it may be? Because SMC, again, is a really big portion as well that we're not going to get into today. But this is the setup. This is the setup of your code, your rating scheduler. You have all your codes. You have all your diagnoses. Now, as I mentioned before, though, if, say, a diagnosis doesn't fit in any of these codes, well, this is where the guide piece really helps out with the rating scheduler, because it allows VA, as VA you should know, to utilize whichever code benefits the veteran the best, and whichever fits the diagnosis and the symptoms for which they have and they're experiencing. So this is really your rating scheduler. This is how it works. I could open this up to any section and it's going to look pretty much the same. Now, when we open up mental health, immediately you're going to see like PTSD, depression, anxiety, all on a general scheduler. So those will all get decided together, rated together, evaluated together, however you want to say it. But ultimately know that this is your rating scheduler here. This is how it's laid out. Each section has a specific series for code addressed to it, 4 digits total, and then it's got its diagnosis, it's got its criteria, and it's got its percentage. All right, so let's run through just one more quick overview of this, because I didn't want to go through the whole rating scheduler just because we'd be here for hours. But I wanted to get you the familiarity to what this looks like. So again, VA, if your systems are down and you can't get into your systems, you can still come to the regular internet and find this website and access it. And veterans, I want you to know that this is on the regular internet. This is public. This is out there for anybody to access and read. So anytime you're in a section, you can always come back to another section. So if I wanted to jump all the way back to Title 38, I could do that. So in this case, let's do that really quick. Let's just go ahead and jump back to Title 38. Now, when you're in the Title 38, so when you went to that first screen that I'm not going to show again, and you click on Title 38 after you scroll down to it, remember, this is where you're going to find the Department of Veterans Affairs portion in Chapter 1. So when you want to start looking at that criteria in the Code of Federal Regulations for the Department of Veterans Affairs, you can click on the Chapter 1. Now you can come down and you can peruse really any part of this. Now, a lot of times I'm living in parts 3 and parts 4 when it comes to VA disability, and there's some other parts in here that we jump into when we get to places like the Board of Veterans Appeals and so forth. There's definitely other sections in here for various other benefits as well. So anytime you want to peruse this, just know that you have the rules and the laws pretty much at your fingertips here. Sometimes it's the matter of understanding how they apply, I think, becomes the challenge, and making sure they are applied right. But in short, for this video, the scheduler of rating disabilities is in part 4. So we can go into part 4, and then we have some general policies in here that we can always take a peek if we want to, arrow them down, and you can find a lot of them in here. And a lot of these will be videos that we will make in order to educate what a lot of these sections are, if not all of them, over time. But if you come to the subpart B, you click on that, you find yourself now in the, well, disability ratings, and ultimately the scheduler for ratings for each body system here. Remember, majority of the body systems will have some stuff up front, just other criteria that have to be considered in the process. But ultimately, the scheduler for ratings for each body system is going to be found on the bottom of each one of those sections there. So everyone, I hope this was helpful for you. This is how you peruse this here. And let's get back to the last little bit here, where you get to look at my face just for a little bit more. So veterans and dedicated VA employees, there you go. This is the Code of Federal Regulations. This is your introduction to it. VA, you should be very familiar with it. It's what ultimately helps you decide the evaluation in the process when you do generate a rating decision or do create a decision. Veterans, I'd be familiar with it, honestly, especially if you want to do your claim on your own until you run into a wall and then you need additional help. But either way, I think it's good knowledge to have to understand where these evaluations are coming from and get an idea of how they're being evaluated. Now, remember, I only gave you the introduction piece of this, so we really get into a bunch of other laws, and sometimes it gets a lot more complex when it comes to the actual evaluation of everything. But this here, again, I feel is a really good tool to give you to get you started more so in the process and help even with all the other videos we did. So a lot more of this makes sense. All right, everybody. I appreciate you being here again on another terrific Tuesday here at the Veteran Lang YouTube channel, where we learn about VA disability. I'm excited to share even more with you, even next week and the weeks to follow. So thank you again, and have a wonderful week.